Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And it's finally time for this. This list has been sitting on my Google Drive regularly, getting updated and tweaked since March, when someone asked me in an offhand comment what I would consider like my top 10 favorite albums would be. List started out as a top 10, and then I couldn't narrow it down to that many, so I expanded it to a top 20. That seemed manageable at first, but then I wanted to add honorable mentions, so I ended up with 30, and then 40, and then 50, and by the time I realized the list of honorable mentions was more than triple the length of the list itself, I thought, screw it, I can make this into a top 100. So here we are, I'm listing out my 100 favorite electronic albums ever, and speaking briefly on each one. Now, let's get the disclaimers out of the way. 1. This is my list that reflects only my own personal musical taste, so your favorite album might not be on here, and you might find something on this list you might not like. But it's not your list. You disagree with it, you can make your own. 2. My numerical ratings that I give in my reviews have no bearing on their ranking in the list. The 10s are at the top, yes, but maybe an album with an 8.7 got ranked above a solid 9. Just kind of depends on my mood. And directly related to that, 3, this list is not final. Just reflects how I feel like right now. Maybe in a month my 67 might turn into my number 53 or something. I mean, those are just kind of arbitrary numbers, but you get the point. And finally, 4, you will not find anything on this list that came out more recent than 2013. 2014, I thought about it, but just didn't really have anything up to the standards on this list, though I considered these. Anything since then feels like I'm kind of jumping the gun, and I got my year-end lists for those anyway, so now we're done with this prelude, let's finally get into the top 100 all-time best electronic albums. Number 100, Break Science, 7 Bridges. After 2 mediocre EPs, Pretty Lights label mates Adam Deitch and Born Lee really blew me away with their debut album that features not a single bad track in my opinion. On top of that, it was basically the album that convinced me I liked hip-hop, as there were several straight rap tracks on here that I really liked. Granted, my favorite track on the album didn't have any rapping on it, but still, one of the best albums that Pretty Lights music has to offer. Number 99, Autumn of Communion with Autumn of Communion 2. Autumn of Communion is one of Lee Norris, aka Metamatic's, side projects in collaboration with µ-Ziq, with their first release being the last album to ever be released on Pete Namlook's Fax label. This album, though, is especially powerful because it's basically a tribute to all things Namlook shortly after his passing in 2012. I think I even like this more than I like any single Pete Namlook album I've heard so far. It's an amazing send-off of an electro-ambient legend, courtesy of one of my favorite artists. Number 98, The Crystal Method, Vegas. TCM are one of the defining names in the big beat movement, and their debut is still their best work. This album is just an absolute blast to listen to, with so much pounding techno and catchy beats and samples, and even a really intense atmosphere that easily gets me pumped up, and once again, not a single bad or even mediocre song in the whole collection. Number 97, Robert Miles, Dreamland. Another pretty widely loved one. Classic in the trance world, and one that still sends shivers up my spine. While it's fairly simple and straightforward, its many catchy piano melodies built up with super satisfying trance buildups and payoffs just keeps me coming and gets me in the feels. Number 96, Moby, 18. I have a lot of mixed thoughts on Moby and his career, but I do like the vast majority of what he has to offer, and this is my favorite release from him. While it's basically a straight continuation on what he did on his previous Play album, he made sure to step up his game in the emotion department, and the overall atmosphere and cohesiveness is much better here than it was on Play, even if that album probably had more memorable individual songs. Despite the obvious comparisons, 18 really is an underrated gem in Moby's lineup. Number 95, Square Pusher, Hello Everything. Square Pusher doesn't really have any albums that I don't like, but this is one of my favorites from the guy, combining all sorts of different styles like his usual jazz and IDM and drum and bass, but also some interesting pop elements and ambient side tracks with some of the guy's best melodies. It's all over the place, but in a good way. Number 94, 808 State, XL. 808 State is a really early favorite of mine, one of the first electronic bands I ever got into, and found out purely by myself rather than from someone else's recommendation. This album's continual weirdness and tone shifts make for a highly entertaining listen, with so many standouts, song that can't stick to the point despite still being catchy and memorable all the way through. Just a gloriously weird 90s techno classic. Number 93, Underworld, Second Toughest in the Infants. This one's a newer entrant into the list, as I haven't been an Underworld fan for a super long time. But I'm definitely one now. And this is my favorite from these guys. The variety from techno and trance to chilled out drum and bass to the usual intense banging with Carl Hyde's half singing. It's an album that just gets better every time I hear it, especially the opening track Juanita /Kiteless /To Dream of Love, my favorite Underworld song to date. Number 92, Solar Fields, Movements. A former standby of Ultimate Records, Solar Fields had so many awesomely epic and detailed electro-ambient outings. This one arguably his grandest and most epic. Not only that, it was my introduction to not only Solar Fields, but the amazing world of Ultimate Records in general. Though there are other Ultimate albums that have topped this one since, it's got some nostalgia power and still an absolutely beautiful album to this day. Number 91, Outtaker with XI. I don't know how Sean Booth and Rob Brown do it. This album at first seemed like a giant, dense mess of random electronics, but it's one that just got better and better every time I heard it. Starting to slowly familiarize myself with its complex inner workings and realizing it wasn't as intimidating or difficult as it initially appeared, much like most of Outtaker's work. And I don't care to hear any pronunciation corrections. Got enough of those. I'm sticking with the one I got. But still, so much respect for these guys, and this is probably the most any of their albums has grown on me. Number 90, Ulrich Schnauz with Faraway Trains Passing By. I just kinda finished talking about this guy the other day, but this is still my favorite album from him. 12 amazing tracks of beautiful and memorable melodies and warm atmospherics. If anyone thinks electronic music has no emotion, then at the very least, they should try this one out, as it's specifically designed for the feels and gets me there every time. Number 89, µ-Ziq with Tango Invective. Mike Paradinas is an IDM legend that I can't believe isn't just as well known as Aphex Twin or Outtaker. This debut album has so much to unpack, so many great melodies accompanied by manic beats with not a single track falling short enjoyment-wise. Really fun album to listen to, and one of my favorites from this guy. Number 88, Outtaker with Incunabula. XI may be the Outtaker album that's grown on me the most. But this one is my favorite from them overall. One of the few albums from them that I liked immediately. And one of the only albums from them that is remotely easy for me to wrap my head around. It's part of Warp Records' Artificial Intelligence series that more or less kicked off IDM and formed it into its own genre, and this is one of the best in said series. Just keeps me coming over and over. Number 87, Pendulum, Hold Your Color.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Here's something a little more mainstream relevant. Figuring out which Pendulum album is my favorite was no easy task, but I went with the most electronic of the three. It's a blood-pumping drum and bass album that also involves elements of rock and pop, and what would eventually become modern dubstep. Genres aside, though, it's another album that is just an absolute blast to listen to. Number 86, Speedy Ginger. I first heard this album when going through the entire Artificial Intelligence series for the first time near the beginning of this year, and it went on this list so fast like you wouldn't even believe. Quickly dethroning Incunabula as my favorite Artificial Intelligence album. The melodies, the atmosphere, the interesting instrumentation. I can't remember the last time an album won me over so quickly. Absolute must listen for sure. Number 85, Juno Reactor, Shango. I was really into Juno Reactor very briefly in high school and kinda slept on him after that, but going back to him brought back so many memories. My favorite from him then is still my favorite from him now. Every song seems to come from a different part of the world, from Mexico to Africa to what have you, but still maintaining that epic and pumped up Goa trance vibe that Juno Reactor is known for. An epic and interesting album that still wows me after a long time of not really listening to this guy. Number 84, Oval, 94 Discount. I have mixed thoughts on glitch pioneer Marcus Pop, but this album is amazingly creative, and I was into it immediately. The 24-minute opening track Do While may be unbelievably repetitive, but its atmosphere and microscopic progression still kept me interested, and the rest of the album is a series of interesting and memorable glitch compositions made out of skipping CDs. It takes some serious talent to make an album out of unpleasant sounds like skipping CDs, and make it so pleasant and relaxing too. Love this album, even if I'm not as taken by Oval's other stuff. Number 83, Solar Fields, Leaving Home. Movements may have been my introduction to Solar Fields and Ultimate Records, but this is my favorite Solar Fields album to date. Maintaining a more chilled out and psychedelic vibe that is continually interesting and immersive all the way through. Much more indicative of the usual Ultimate sound, I might add. Good stuff. Number 82, Steve Reich, Music for 18 Musicians. Though this was before electronic music was even really a thing, this album set so many of the foundations that electronic music was built on, with lots of repetition, but lots of change too. And the best part is that unlike other really early pre-electronic recordings, Music for 18 Musicians is every bit as enjoyable and interesting now, even with all the decades of electronic history added on top of it. It may not technically be electronic, but if you're a fan of this genre, then you owe it to yourself to listen to this at least once. Chances are you'll probably listen to it more tn once, though. Number 81, Amon Tobin, Out from Out Where. Amon Tobin, one of the Ninja Tune staples, started to go in a more experimental direction than he did previously, and the result is absolutely breathtaking, with so many different weird sounds, intense break beats, atmospheres, melodies, just awesome stuff. I have, so much to say about this that I can't really cover in a brief segment like this, so I'll have to actually review this one at some point, but yeah. Awesome. Number 80, Fortet, There Is Love in You. Fortet's music has always been all bright and sunny, and the kind of stuff that just puts a smile on my face, combining acoustic elements from jazz and post-rock with IDM, and this is just a highly pleasurable listen. Just another memorable and interesting track after another that never fails to put me in a good mood. Number 79, ATB, No Silence. Yes, I know this guy's about as commercial and mainstream intended as trance can get, but I don't care. This is my list, not yours. And though I may not be a big Armin or Tiesto fan, ATB absolutely dominated my freshman year of high school, and this album in particular got so many listens back then that I can't help but get a nostalgia burst anytime I come back to it. And I still love it all the way through. I may have grown out of my ATB phase long ago and I haven't liked any of his new stuff, but the nostalgia is firmly planted in this one, and heck, it's the best dang commercial trance album I've ever heard, so I'm still gonna recommend it. Number 78, The Orb, Cydonia. This album is among the worst received album that The Orb ever came out with, and I have literally no idea why. It's an absolute masterpiece in my eyes. There's just a little of everything on here, from the poppy but immersive Once More, to the ethnic and exotic Promise, to the intense A Mile Long Lump of Lard, to the absolutely insane Thursday's Keeper and relaxing Terminus. I even like the interludes like Ignoble, which some people I guess find annoying, but for me add a layer of absolute insanity to this album that I can't help but love. Number 77, Global Communication 7614. This project from Tom Middleton and Mark Pritchard turned out a psychedelic ambient masterpiece that is tranquil and odd one moment and catchy and foot-tapping another. Real shame Global Communication never made another album. This one's a classic for sure. Number 76, The Future Sound of London, Accelerator. One of the staples of the 90s techno-rave scene in the UK, this was the album that pushed Gaz Cobain and Brian Dugans into the limelight, and the one that has more than its fair share of personal nostalgia. I mean, FSOL have gone on to some very different and more creative places since this one, but I have to still acknowledge Accelerator as a big part of my life. It's one of the reasons why I love 90s techno so much, and probably the one FSOL album I've listened to the most. Number 75, Orbital The Altogether. Oh boy, if you know me, you know you're gonna be seeing no shortage of these guys on this list. I know most people consider this to be Orbital's worst album, but I have to wholeheartedly disagree. This album is absolutely crazy and sounds like it could have come from the mind of a mental patient, but underneath all the insanity, there's a sense that like everything was very deliberate and planned out. Even if nothing save for the Doctor Who cover became an Orbital staple, in my opinion, every song on here is a winner, and I loved it immediately. Much like the Orb Cydonia, if you're in the mood for something crazy but fun, Orbital will not disappoint. And I swear that's not just my fanboyism talking. Number 74, µ-Ziq, Bluff Limbo. I consider this album to be Mike Paradinas' masterwork. Every song on here has a completely different tone and feel, but they all play out in a similar way, building up and stacking new sound upon new sound upon new sound, all extremely layered and busy. I mean, it's not the most cohesive project, but it is insanely interesting and dense and really fun to listen to. Fantastic album. Number 73, Monolake, Hongkong. And after a totally maximalist album, here's one that relies more on its simplicity. It's a wonderfully atmospheric, minimalist, ambient techno album, with each song feeling like a new environment. Well, almost each one. Lantau and Macau are pretty similar, but still, really relaxing and interesting album. Great debut for an artist that would only go on to get better. Number 72, Pretty Lights, A Color Map of the Sun. Oh, hello, t-shirt. Even though Pretty Lights is nowhere near as huge a part of my life as when this album came out, it forever changed my musical taste. Break Science may have eventually confirmed it, but it was Pretty Lights that first made me suspect I could like hip-hop. A guy who previously relied on his sampler went out to make completely original music, and coming out not only very much the same artist, just as catchy as always, but even better than before. The atmosphere of this album is still unlike anything else I've heard, and this is far and away the guy's best work. Number 71, Square Pusher, Music is Rotted One Note. Tom Jenkinson's catalog has so many different styles and sounds in it, but having always liked jazz myself, seeing the closest Square Pusher has ever done to a straight jazz album is pretty awesome. But of course, it's not just straight jazz. First of all, it's more of the experimental Miles Davis Bitches Brew variety. And second of all, there is plenty of spooky electronic weirdness to go around as well. It's a strange and difficult album to be sure, but it's one I absolutely love. Number 70, Orbital, The Middle of Nowhere. Don't worry, this list isn't gonna have all of Orbital's albums. 5 of them though. But yeah, this album is awesome too, and for the exact opposite reasons that I love The Altogether. While that album is intentionally insane and all over the place, The Middle of Nowhere shows Orbital at their most focused and cohesive, creating an album with an intense and driving atmosphere that ties everything together, but still creating lots of creative and memorable individual tracks as well. What can I say? I love Orbital. Number 69, Sounds from the Ground, Kin. SFTG are another band that have absolutely defined my life. And while I love all their many albums for different reasons, their debut Kin has a special place in my heart, mainly for the big centerpiece track Triangle, that is almost certainly my favorite track they've ever done. Although the rest of this album holds up just as well, with lots of cool dub reggae, techno, and plenty of other engaging songs. Although yeah, it is mainly that one track that puts Kin on this list. Still, absolutely worth your time. Go check it out. Number 68, Nightmares on Wax, Feelin Good. If there's one thing that these trip-hop veterans have mastered, it's the art of feel-good vibes, and this album is no exception. But this one is a little different from their usual stuff in that it's a lot warmer and more comforting than their usual material. More live instrumentation, and more emotion too. Just great to see them still on top of their game so late into their career. Number 67, Burial, Untrue. I just finished talking about this one a couple of weeks ago, but to recap, Untrue is the best work from a highly unique artist, and despite it being fairly samey sounding, it absolutely revels in its atmosphere, which brings up images of the darkest part of the city, like the back alleys and all the dirtiness surrounding it, but still really feeling emotional. Great album. Number 66, Bonobo, Black Sands. Another Ninja Tune veteran. This guy makes some of the best jazzy trip-hop around, and this is still my favorite from the guy. Every track is memorable, and as we know, I like me some jazz, and some laid-back stuff. As such, I love this. Not a ton else to say there, though. Number 65, Kraftwerk, Computer World. No electronic music fan would be caught dead without some Kraftwerk on their favorites list. Kraftwerk, after all, are basically the founders of electronic music, and on top of that, I was lucky to get into them very early on, back when Orbital and Air were my only other points of reference into electronic music. I may have basically listened this album into the ground as a middle schooler, but it still holds up great nearly 40 years later. Excellent electropop with some cool weird moments too. Number 64, LCD Sound System, Sound of Silver. These guys may be a bit more indie rock than they are electronic, but they're definitely electronic enough to get on this list. And yeah, I love these guys. They're catchy, they're intense, they're weird, but above all, they are a ton of fun. And they're the life of whatever party they're at. But they're capable of toning it down too. There's some more laid back stuff here too. But I just mainly listen to them to have a great time, and this album is my favorite main album from them. Number 63, BT, Movement and Still Life.
Walk with me, the features it had.
Ooh yes, it's BT, one of the most talented and adventurous producers, if not the most talented of our time. This is a bit early in his catalog, but is the first to show he isn't just capable of making great trance, he's bringing in all sorts of other popular styles and maintaining consistent enjoyability. The up-tempo moments are lots of fun, the down-tempo moments are also emotional, and it's just fantastic all the way through. Number 62, Mathematics, Dope for the Robot. Dope for the Robot is not an impressive album, there's only 8 tracks and they're all pretty simplistic and toned down, but they all totally stick with you. No matter how odd a song may sound, it gets stuck in your head, and this is precisely why I love Mathematics. His style of IDM is one that you can return to after so many years and still be just as fun and catchy. Nothing grandiose, but definitely something special. Number 61, Amon Tobin, Permutation. Amon Tobin is a super creative artist that can make some really cool abstract stuff, like Out From Out Where, but my favorite album from him is from his early days, full of ninja tune jazz breaks. But not just any jazz breaks. Permutation is very much movie soundtrack inspired, and the dark atmosphere it provides is absolutely captivating, as well as the kind of thing that can stick with you and keep you returning to it. Just fantastic stuff. And I'm gonna stop the list here, pick up in another video, because I don't think I'm gonna be able to fit all of this in just one video. See you in part 2, where I cover number 60 through 21.